Welcome to Beyond the Office, Building and Leading Remote Teams. I'm your host, Bill Keller. On this episode, we're excited to have leadership expert Tracey Jones with us. Tracy holds a doctorate in leadership, is an 8-time author, but also has the real-world experience to back up her advice. She's a graduate of the U.S. Air Force Academy, a decorated veteran. Tracy also has worked at the NSA and in the private sector at the likes of Northrop Grumman. Tracy is now president of Tremendous Leadership, where she continues her father's legacy of providing truly tremendous leadership training resources to help people meet their truly God-given potential. Tracy, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's a tremendous honor to be here.
Well, I have a connection with you through your father. He was one of the first people that I saw in the personal growth space when I was just an early teenager. My parents took me to see him. I think it was at one of the local universities, maybe Franklin and Marshall or Millersville University, and he made a deep impact on me. So I'm wondering if you can, because you're continuing your father's legacy, if you can tell us a little bit about your father, and then we have a lot of questions to ask you because you are a leadership expert in your own right, and we're excited to hear what you have to tell us today.
Oh, thanks, Bill. And I was just so delighted to hear that you got imprinted with Tremendous as a young man growing up. And I grew up with it. And I sat under the tutelage of his cohorts, who were people like Og Mandino and Zig Ziglar and Norman Vincent Peale. So this is who I grew up with. So needless to say, there was not a lot of thumb sucking or whining or laziness in the house growing up. But my father, and I didn't really know about his roots, his origins until honestly about 2 days before he died. I knew it wasn't all good, but I did not know what he had come through. And I want to share that there's a point for that. It wasn't that he was shamed or hiding it. It's that it was his old life and his new life happened later. And that's what he was living in. So we really taught that too, that adaptive quotient and how you're constantly evolving and transforming. So he grew up born in 27 in the deep South in terrible poverty, like everybody else, a broken family, the oldest of 5 kids, and he flunked out of school in the 8th grade. You know, they had to work and he was working a bunch of different jobs as a child to try and make ends meet for the family. And so he got tossed out of school and he hung out with his father, went up to Alaska to work on a pipeline, wound up back in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So he grew up in Tallahassee, Alabama, and he always says that he has 2 states that claim him. Alabama claims he's from Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania claims he's from Alabama. So it's kind of funny. He would joke about that. So he married a Yankee woman, Gloria, my mother, and had a 6 Yankee babies. So that was one of the things that really changed his life was Gloria. And I talk about him meeting her in The Art of Tremendous, which came out in October. One of my father's books was The 3 Decisions. And he says there's only 3 decisions you're going to make in life: who you're going to live your life with. And he got it right the first time with Gloria, who he loved up until his very last breath. And they were married decades and decades and had a gorgeous relationship. Number 2, what are you going to live your life in? And he found Mutual New York life insurance industry, which is still a phenomenal career. And it wasn't contingent on your title or your education level, because he neither had a pedigree nor he didn't even have a GED, a high school diploma. But life insurance was all about, he had a passion for it. And he loved helping people. And his 3rd decision was, who are you going to live your life for? And he answered that question as a young man in his mid-20s when a gentleman named Jim life. There's 4 older of us and then a 9-year gap and 2 younger. So there's 17 years between all of us. So, he'd go out speaking, come home. Next thing you know, we had a sibling on the way, that kind of thing. And he says the only reason he only had 6 kids is because Gloria did not like children. So that was always kind of a joke too. But yeah, so that was him. So I just grew up with somebody that knew he came from nothing, was thankful for everything, just had an intense sense of gratitude. He kept us really grounded in a work ethic, a sense of resilience, a love of God, and a hope that everything bad that happens to us isn't meant to break us down. It's to make us better so we can help other people. So when you're taught that as a child, you get to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that are going to hit you as a young person, as an adult. So that's kind of him in a nutshell. And he left insurance right as I was born, so early 60s. And then he went full-time, left me to New York and went full-time into speaking. He wrote a book called Life is Tremendous in 1967, which has never gone out of print, which is really unusual for a book 50 years or older. And so I picked up the reins in 2009 after he immigrated to heaven. And we've been helping people connect with a love of God, a love of people, and a love of book ever since then.
That is fantastic. And one of his very famous quotes is, "You'll be the same person today you are 5 years from now, except for the two things: the people you meet and the books you read." And you said a couple things in there. You said there was no thumb sucking. That was one of his like trademark things. You thumb sucker. He would give you the shock treatment and and kind of tell you how it was. And so as I was reading your book, A Message to Millennials, I felt that same sort of dynamic as you were reading, because it's kind of this juxtaposition between, it is a book written between you and your father, and he talked about the 7 principles of leadership, and you talk about the 7 principles of followership. And but I could also hear you, or him in you, as you're reading through it, and it was just very interesting, because I think that today we're often a little bit coddled, and and sometimes if we can take it, we need that kind of like forceful message as long as somebody can hear that. And so we don't get stronger in ease. And that's what I think I learned from the story you were telling about your father is, we often look back at that and how we want to make our children's lives easier. But the reality is that's not what's going to necessarily make their lives better. We want something different for them. And so I think that's fantastic, that story. But also it's a testament that, just because you have failure in your life doesn't mean it's fatal. Doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to come back from that. And even in a difficult upbringing, he was able to overcome that. And I think that's a message that we all need to be able to hear today. But we talked about followership, and in that, A Message to Millennials, I think if I get the second subtitle right, your parents didn't tell you and what your employer needs you to know. Is that correct?
Correct.
So we often, our podcast is often about leadership and leading remote teams, but you talk about followership like we were talking about. So tell us why do you feel followership is equally important as leadership?
Go back in time to about about 2015. And, here I am 5 years in, 6 years into running the company. And as you said in my thing, I've been an officer in the military. I went to war. I worked, ran huge government contracts, Applied Materials, a Fortune 100 company in the semiconductor industry, done all these things. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, dear Lord, am I doing anything right? You get to that point where you go, am I really making a difference? And I love leadership and I aspire to be a wonderful leader. But looking back, I was having a lot of the same issues, bringing in the wrong people, not being clear in my where I wanted to go, not setting goals, and hooking up with the wrong followers. Okay. And I mean, I was single for 25 years. I just got married 4 years ago. So I would tell people my picker's broken. That's why I didn't date, because I couldn't figure out. But leaders and followers is really a dating relationship. Okay. Because you are in your work engagement and your work covenant. So here I am. I'm like sad. I'm kind of burnt out. And I'm like, how can I talk about leadership? I don't even feel like a leader. I don't feel very tremendous. And lo and behold, I found this book, The Power of Followership, okay, by Robert Kelly. And on the back, it says, without his armies, Napoleon was just a man with grandiose ambition. Mm-hmm. And the tagline is how to create leaders people want to follow and followers who lead themselves. And I was like, whoa, mind blown. So I started because I'm like, I have to figure out why. What have I done wrong? What have I done right? And what needs to change? Okay. Because I'm going to own what I can own, but I also have to look at it and say, am I bringing the wrong people into the organization? Am I being clear in the vision? You go through all those different things. And so I went to study followership. And that's why I got my PhD in leadership halfway through these courses where they're like, bad leader, bad leader, bad leader, bad leader. And I'm like, that's it. I own that I was not a perfect leader. But dear Lord, some of these thumbsuckers, I could give them $1 million every day and they would still bite the hand that fed them. So I think any leader knows you're going to have people that are a dream to manage because they're open to being teachable and they're thankful to be there and they have your back as a leader. And then there's the other part of the equation where it's very transactional, or they'll even sabotage you, or they're passive aggressive. So I really had to look at this and I really said, listen, I got to study followership. I got to understand who is on my team and who's not. And 4 years ago, a series called The Chosen came out. I don't know if you ever watched that, but it's all about Jesus and how he chose his 12 disciples. And it's not so much about Christ, although it is, and his years of leadership, but it's how he picked his followers and called them and how they chose to follow him, the chosen. So the bottom line with leadership and followership, it takes two to tango. And 80% of the success of any organization, I found out in my research, because that's what I wrote my PhD study on, was a study on follower self-efficacy, not on leadership, because you can have the greatest leader in the world. If you don't have followers that are engaged and all in with the vision and see the leadership through the leader's lens, you can't lead them. Some people are unteachable, untrainable, and unleadable. And anybody that has teenagers will know that this is, I don't have any kids, but I've heard this, I can remember, there's just some people that no matter what, they're not going to come your way. And yet you have them on your team. So I really want to unpack this. And the way I love The Chosen is Jesus called them, but it was up to them to go all in. And I mean, all in. That's really what fascinated me when I read The Power of Followership. Also, I saw a movie back in 2016, I think it was, or 17, maybe 18, called The Darkest Hour. And it was about Churchill and the 3 days during the Second World War where Churchill was beaten, had to negotiate with Mussolini on Hitler. And at the last minute, he decided, no, we're not going to negotiate. And we all know how that changed the history of the world. So it was very much a fascination of, as a leader, leaders need care and feeding too. And I tell followers, if you want a better leader, be a better follower. If you want a better husband, be a better wife or spouse. If you want a better parent, be a better child. So there's this dyadic nature of it takes two to tango. And I look at people and they're complaining about their boss. And I say to them, would you want to hire you? And they kind of look at me and I'm like, yeah, while you're pointing the finger at your boss, you have an obligation, a responsibility to do everything you can to manage up and make your supervisor look good. Yes, even if you don't like them, okay, because it's just the right thing to do. So that's really where I really unpack leadership and followership. And in my research, I found, because you're like, well, I can't do well because I have a crappy leader. 80% of the success of any organization is the quality of the followers. You can have a very average leader, but if you have robust followers, you will do way better than if you have a visionary leader and kind of laissez-faire followers. Followers are where it happens. So that's what I really unpacked, and that's what I really share with leaders and organizations. Make that fit the perfect fit, and you do it right from the beginning.
That's awesome. So what do you think people misunderstand or get wrong about followership? I mean, because, I think we want to be leaders, right? Because we want to go to what we think is the top of the pile, right? We want to go to the top, and most people want to start we want to start there, right? And we don't want to go through the followership because we see that as less for some reason. And I wouldn't necessarily say that's the case, but what do you see people getting wrong about followership?
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because we have really failed in teaching people great followership. So I grew up 5 years of military school. The one thing the military will teach you is to be a follower first. And I tell people, if followership is beneath you, leadership is way beyond you. Okay. Because if you cannot be a servant and take orders and be teachable and be adaptable and be trainable and accept rebuke, there's no way you can handle leadership where you have to take blame half the time for something you didn't even know was going on. Okay. The military taught us, you shut up and color. Nobody really cares what you have to say. I'm going to tell you what to wear, what to think, what to do, where to live, even what to say. And that teaches you to be a good soldier, to discipline you, to be a good disciple. Okay. So even in marriage, even in coming to faith, we make these vows and these commitments, but then it's all about being obedient, being a servant, being teachable, being trainable, and learning. So the two things that I really see that we get wrong about followership is first, thinking that it's somehow lesser than or beneath you. I had a couple organizations tell me, well, the kids don't want you to use the word follower because they think it's kind of, it's lesser than. And I'm like, well, then I can't talk about leadership because if you can't follow, there's no way you can lead. That is the core of what leaders are built on. You don't just jump to the top. You have to learn how to follow. And at any time in leadership, half the time where you're leading, you're going to flex back to your followership role. I mean, I may run the organization like you, Bill, But at any given time, we're following and we're flexing back and forth between the two roles. The other thing is, I would tell followers, we have been very ignorant to our leaders. TikTok, YouTube, everybody has a voice now to lambaste their leader. And I tell people that just makes you look like trash, because if you are accepting a paycheck from somebody, respect them. And that doesn't mean you have to think they're perfect or you have to idolize them or follow them blindly, but you have to be respectful. And I think what we're really doing with followers now, people are committing egregious sins that will haunt them the rest of their life because they're so disrespectful. Okay. And no amount of bad behavior should cause you to exhibit bad behavior. And so I tell people it's about professional maturity and understand followership. If you don't like your boss is not a mind reader. Go to them, talk to them, share with them what your aspirations are, hear from them what they have to say about you. And so it's really this wonderful open line of communication. And that's what I really tell followers. You have a voice. Now, if you have a leader that doesn't want to hear you, and I've had plenty of those, you have to make your choice to move, stay or go, but never as a follower sit there and complain to everybody else in the universe except the one person who you are upset with. And we have a responsibility to our leaders to make them the best that we can. And so that's the one thing I would say to my younger self, Tracy, yes, you had some real mutton heads you worked for, but you weren't always the easiest person to lead either. So I would tell them, give your boss grace. We want people to give us grace and give us forgiveness. Do the same thing to your leader.
That's fantastic. What I really think that most people miss is when they have a problem boss, this is an opportunity for you to go and say is, okay, how can I make them better? If I can lead from behind, right? If I can be that follower and still lead from behind and make a difference, and I can, are you adept enough at, presenting your arguments, presenting what you can do, and are you good enough really at what you're supposed to be there to do, right? That they're going to notice you. And many people, I think in your book is like, hey, why don't they notice me? Why don't they see my true potential? Well, show them your true potential, right? It's not something you say, right? It's something that you do. It's something that they see. And so I really appreciate that concept. As a leader and as an owner, I want to take care of my people, right? I desperately, and oftentimes I want more for them than they want from themselves, which is really difficult because I'm like, you have so much potential, but potential is, I found over the years, is highly overrated, right? You have all this potential, but you're not using it. And, but I love the people that, whether they have a lot of potential or little potential, they're using everything they have. Right? They're putting it all on the field of battle, as it were, right? And those are the people that I just love them. I go into a McDonald's sometimes and I see somebody who is performing at what I think is the highest level. And I'm like, this is awesome, right? I'll bring it back to my team. I showed a TikTok, Instagram reel the other week about an electrician. And I said, do you guys see this, the work that he's doing? He is a boss at what he's doing, right? He's got the tools, he's got the technology, he's got the knowledge and the skill, and he's using it all to be a master at his craft. And I thought it was fantastic. So I really appreciate those stories and that advice, because I think it's so true. Many times we want so much, we expect so much from our leaders, but we don't expect enough from ourselves.
So well said. And it's excellence. And you brought up the point. We don't fall in love with a boss. Okay, now I have had some leaders I would take a bullet for, but that boss can be gone tomorrow. You have to fall in love with the vision, because otherwise when they leave, you follow them, which I know a lot of people that do that. And I have done that, only to then have that boss leave. And I'm like, oh, Lord, what have I done? So make sure when you love the vision and you're all in with the vision, you can tolerate the idiosyncrasies of your boss. The other thing, and you talked about, different new paradigms and stuff. What I really studied in my PhD work, there's two theories: implicit followership theory and implicit leadership theory. And I would encourage everybody out there, whether you're looking for a job or boss is looking for people, implicit followership theory is for us as leaders. What does my ideal follower look like? Okay, so for you and I, we want people that are self-driven, generate their own lift, can figure out stuff, that this is what I'm looking for. So if I bring somebody on that needs a lot more care and feeding, that's not going to be a good fit for me. It's not that they're a bad person or I'm a bad boss. It means that this is what I'm looking for. Now, implicit leadership theory is who is my ideal leader? And this starts when we're about 4 or 5 years old. So mine was people like my dad, Zig Ziglar. So I look at people that are put together, integrous, successful, came from nothing, ethical, grounded in their faith. So as a little girl, I looked at these people and said, like a little duck that imprints, this is who does it for me as a leader. Therefore, if I interview with a leader and they are somewhat gray on ethics, or they're laissez-faire and they don't deal with stuff, or they're squishy, that's not going to be a good partnership with me. I have worked for people like that, and I thought, oh, and again, I'm not casting guilt on either one. It's just a bad fit. And bad fits, eventually somebody's leaving the company. And guess what? It's going to be me, because I'm not signing the paycheck. So I tell people, yes, I would jump for salary, job title, and I would live in a cool city. Okay, that'll get you so far. But you have to make sure who you're partnering with day to day on the job, that there's a value congruence there and that you can respect them. I don't care if I like them or not, because I don't care if I like the boss or not. I don't care if they like me, but I have to be able to trust them. Trust is a big thing for me. So I should have earlier really vetted my bosses too and made sure that I was going to be able to go all in with them. And I have a couple different tests online that you can take to help you identify what is your ideal leader and who are your ideal followers. It's very important for us to know that.
That's fantastic, and maybe we can get those links and put them in the show notes. That would be awesome. So as we're moving through, we've got through the pandemic, and there's this big push to work from home, hybrid work. How do you see leadership changing? Do we, with the current leadership principles that we have in place, or that most people think are best practices, do you think with that change that we need a new paradigm, or do the old principles still work?
No, I think the old principles work since the dawn of civilization. I mean, one of my favorite books is John Maxwell, There's No Such Thing as Business Ethics, which means if you're not ethical in your personal life or your spiritual life, you can't be, leadership is a lifelong, congruent, universal truth. And yes, leadership theory kind of evolves, as they call it, but it all goes back to the same core principles, the same foundational truths and principles. So I don't think it's different. I do think as leaders, though, if more and more people go into remote, we as leaders need to be aware of the fact that some people love the remote thing, but other people really are going to be lost without the one-on-one interaction. So you're going to have to figure out as a leader who gets most energized and motivated by that. The other thing is, as a leader, that I think remote work really has emphasized the need for is clarity, processes, metrics, and accountability. Because it's one thing when I know I'll see him in the office and I'll ask. I think with remote work, it's wonderful. I get the whole thing. I love it. But leaders need to be very clear in the expectations, how they're going to track it, what the rules of engagement are. Just shift that. But that's something that should have been going on, whether we were in person or whether we weren't in person. And I do think the whole pandemic thing has really opened the dialogue between what is most important for each individual. Leadership and followership are very contextualized. So while somebody may so value remote work, somebody else may be like, I could care less. So it's opened that dialogue for us as leaders to get with each one of our followers and say, what is flexibility most important to you? Some people are like, no, don't have kids, don't care. I would go to work 24/7. When I was in the military, I would have some of my enlisted that would volunteer for every deployment because they just love to go and deploy. And then I have other people that are like, nope, I can go on this one and no others. So I think it really helped us as leaders sit down with each follower and say, is this important to you? How can we best fit this into the new work environment and make this a win-win for all of us?
I think of the word intentional, right? It's very intentional with each individual person. It's not this, very broad thing where he's like, oh, I'll take this principle and apply it equally amongst all of our people. And that's not working in today's environment, especially with people who have different needs. They're working from home, they're working in the office. Do they need more attention? Are they okay to run by themselves? And so, are we intentional? I loved what you said about the clarity. What were the 4 things again? I think that you said that we need as leaders: clarity, we need process. Do you remember what the others
structure
are?
and communication. Oh, and accountability. Yeah, but that'll kill
That's
any leader. That killed Adam and Eve. You know what I'm saying? They went off point. They scope drifted. So all those things are really important. And you hit on such a good point. Followers, just like leaders, don't badmouth all leaders. Don't badmouth all nationalities. Don't badmouth all religions. And yet we do it with leaders and followers. Everybody's their own unique entity. And the one thing that I wish I had learned earlier, and I would encourage followers, is get with each of your employees. And like you said, some of our followers are going to need a lot of care and feeding. Others, you give it to them and I got it, boss, I'll let you know. So it's like anybody that has multiple children. You have to figure out everybody has their own gifting, their own temperament, their own desires, aspirations, and motivation. And it's up to you to find it out, fit them in, and give them the resources they need to be success. Then on the flip side, it's their responsibility to honor and respect you, follow the rules, and do what they're supposed to do. So it's a dance. You can't be on the dance floor with followers that are dragging their feet or trying to dance to a different beat. And I tell people that they're like, well, I don't think the company should be doing this. And I'm like, that's fine. You're entitled to that. But then you have to go to a different company because this is not your company. So it's this fighting from within that I see a lot of. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about being in the military. It's about chain of command. And if you don't like this chain of command, you're not in the military and you have the freedom, you need to go someplace else.
And I think that too many times we take something that is matters of style, right? And we make that paramount as to matters of principle. You know what the old saying is, and matters of principles or matters of style swim with the current, and matters of principles stand like a rock. And too many times, like I don't like the leader did this, right? He talked to me this way, right? And I'm like, okay, well maybe he was meaner than he should have been. Maybe he had a bad day, but like let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. Is that really crucial that day? Are you seeing a pattern? Okay, if he's treating everybody poorly, then that's probably not the company that you're wanting to be in. But oftentimes we pick this moment in time to make a judgment on the whole scenario. Yes.
I'm out. Here's my 2-week notice. And it's like, really? And that's what I tell people. Are they stopping you from doing your job? Well, no. And I go, then don't worry about it or start looking. I mean, but it's not worth falling on your sword for. And you know what? You have your own rough edges to worry about. And a lot of times the things that annoy us most in other people are the things that we need to work on in our life. So, and the last thing is show grace. Leaders aren't perfect. Give them grace. And just like you have your bad days, so does your boss. So just let it go. Don't ruminate on it. And if you need to have a conversation, have a conversation. But otherwise, just keep doing what you're paid to do.
I will give this piece of advice as somebody who's been on both sides is a couple things that I would keep in mind. Try to make your boss, what would make your boss's life easier? One, that's one I like to think about. And two, when have you given your boss, praise and or encouragement? Have you ever done that? I mean, I can think of probably the times that it's happened to me. I mean, I probably have been in business for going on 3 decades, and I've been very fortunate to have many good employees, and they've sent me many great messages, but it doesn't happen very often. But when it does, I do notice it, right? And it's like, wow, they really get it. They understand, and it is so encouraging to me when I see that. Somebody will write me a message and say, hey, this is really impactful. This is fantastic. I really appreciate you taking the time to do that, to spend this time with me, whatever it is. And I was like, wow, that's a real encouragement. And so I don't think people understand how much they can have an impact on their boss if they go about it in the right way.
Well, and it's lonely at the top. And I tell people, your boss is at the 50,000 foot level, because they have to be in the future. But everything, you got managers at the 30,000 foot, individual contributors at the 10,000, and new people at the 5. So you're seeing things at your level that your boss has to be up here. Managers are in the present and doers, but leaders create and managers maintain. So help them, because every time you're pulling them back out of the future, they're trying to make sure the lights stay on in the next month. So you want to make sure that you're a good soldier at your level. And, I used to sit there and say, I can't believe leadership. Blah, blah, blah. And then I got to that level and I'm like, holy cow, there's all this stuff at this level that I thought I knew. But and again, it was pride, ego. And then I understood, give your boss some grace. They're juggling a lot of different things. And soon enough, you'll be a leader too. And then you'll see, it's just like the person that says to their kid, I hope you get a kid just like you. Be careful. You may get followers just like you someday when you're a leader. And then you'll be like, oh, Lord. And that's what I kind of have. And I'm like, okay, I got my lesson, Lord. Stop. You don't need to teach me this anymore.
So, in your book, you talk a lot about most people think that the purpose of life is happiness, but you talk about the purpose of life being growth. And I'm just curious, like, what are you studying right now? What are you finding impactful? Because I'm just curious for myself. Is like, what is somebody who is an expert in leadership? You've done your dissertation in leadership. What are you studying, and what are you finding that's new?
Well, I'm always digging out public domain stuff that I can republish. We're just putting out Ben Franklin's Way to Wealth. So I love the classics. One of the things that getting a PhD will teach you is to do a literature review where you go back to what they call the seminal thinkers, 50 years and prior. Go back to Aristotle, go back to Moses, go back to the Old Testament, when it all started. And so it's really good. A lot of that time, I'm back in the classic wisdom, the foundational pieces. One of my favorite quotes is leadership is lifelong learning. And the brain is a fabulous muscle, mental plasticity, cognitive regeneration, and it's use it or lose it. And so, especially, I encourage people as you start aging, if you don't use it, just like sitting on the couch and your muscles, we're still flesh and blood, use it or lose it. So I really work on my mind to read the classics, understand the classics, because every year I'm at a different season of my life and I see things differently. So that's really what I encourage. And then I've always got a book that I'm working with somebody on writing or publishing. And then I've always got a book that I'm writing. So that entails, or speaking. For every speech I give, I read 2 fresh books on the topic, so I can be really current on what's going on there. I interview people on my podcast, and then I'm doing kind of a longitudinal study, which I hope you'll be a guest, where I'm pulling together all these threads to do my own kind of like composite book about what it takes to pay the price of leadership. And like I said, I'm helping other people write their books. So I'm working on them to get their message out. And then I'm crafting my own books. So books, lots of books.
I love that. It's books have changed my life. I tell my team, I was like, "What are you reading? Here's what I'm reading." I try to share that with with them, and I'm really trying to encourage them, to get beyond. Most people go, "Well, I haven't read a book since college," and oftentimes they'll read a book in their domain, whether it's accounting or something else, and I'm like, "No, I mean that's good, and there's nothing wrong with that, but get outside of that. What else are you reading that's going to because for me, there's that skill set that you need to be successful in your career, but there's so many skills that are beyond what you're going to learn in school or college or in that book about that specific career that's really going to be the thing that propels you from good to great, right? It's all those extra skills that are not in the textbook of your chosen career.
Well, and I think even I'm an adjunct professor where I teach leadership. And what I tell them, my students are in the financial services industry, but I do share with them every paper you write, every briefing you give, always have your experience, but then have some current research or data, and then have somebody like one of the legacy people in the field, a Charles Schwab or somebody. And that's how, again, the 3-legged stool. So when you are growing in your job, when you can go in, even if you're asking for a raise, well, boss, here's my experience, here's what kind of is going on in the job market, and then have another real world example. It just, when you come in, it gives you credibility. It lets people know, okay, this person has done their homework. And it's not just, well, I want this or I think this. Nah, nobody cares what you think, feel, or want. Okay. When you come in and you show that you have a great critical mind, and that's one of the keys to exemplary followership. Critical thinking skills, not critical spirit, critical thinking. So when you show, your boss wants you to have a first-rate mind because, as Ken Blanchard says, none of us is as smart as all of us. I'm well aware of how much I don't know. That's why I'm paying you, because here's another brain. And if your brain is hungry and sponging up, Tracy, did you know this? Tracy, did you hear that we can do this with AI now? Tracy, did you hear about this new publishing book? I did not. Thank you. So it really gives you, as an individual contributor, you will stand out. And as you said, we don't just read because we have a need to know, but when you start reading because you have a need to grow, that's when you own your development. That's when people start looking at you as a future leader. As the airplane, I'm going to put you on the runway. I'm going to give you all the gas you need, but you have to hit the thrust button and you have to generate your own lift. And I think personal development, when you show your boss that, now it's going to irritate some bosses, it's going to threaten some bosses, you're going to look like a weirdo or a suck up or whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because when you leave the masses and come off a Mount Majority, you're going to start traveling a road less traveled. So get ready for it. It means you're doing it right.
Awesome. So this is kind of a question. If you could grant a power to a leader or capability or piece of knowledge, what do you think that would be that would make the most significant impact in their leadership? A skill, a piece of knowledge?
I would say one thing is to learn how to be a first-rate critical thinker. And I say that because as a leader, you have to test everything for truth. And that means you have to be aware of your biases, assumptions, and blind spots. You have to be aware of what you don't know. You have to look at everybody that comes into your court and understand who's a charlatan and who's for real. You know that. Okay. So I would say to leaders, your ability to be a great thinker and discerner of truth is going to be the number one, because a lot of times you'll be trying to solve issues when you really haven't clearly identified the issue, or you're going to put your complete faith in somebody that turns out to be a snake. Can I get an amen? We've all had that happen to
Yes.
us. I even had that happen to me 2 years ago. I have a PhD. I should know better than this. I didn't test for truth. And so I would just really, leaders, learn how to do your due diligence, learn how to find sources where you can get to the purest form of truth, and really just have a wise counsel really close to you to be able to go, does this sound right or does this not sound right? And so you have kind of your inner sanctum, your inner board of directors, because all this stuff going on around you, it doesn't really matter until you're able to ascertain the truth. And then you can devise the next step and take action.
I love that. I was actually at a seminar one time, and the gentleman in that seminar asked, "What is truth?" Right? Define it for me. And everybody's like, and he says it's a very simple definition. It goes back to the Latin veritas and means what is. Right? It's reality. And so the question is, I ask leaders is, are you able to see reality? We all have these glasses that are a little bit foggy, a little bit cloudy, a little bit dirty. Every day, are you able to clean them off and get a closer vision of the truth? And so that's what I believe reading the books is all about, the critical thinking. Then not just reading the books, but then taking this and saying, okay, how does this change what I believe, right? How can I start to clear up the glasses? What was my vision before, of the world? And how does this thought, if I put this new lens in, how does that make it clearer? It's probably not going to be, 100% clear, but I'm looking to get a closer version of the truth. And so I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. And here's just a real quick analogy for your listeners that you talked about. Jeff Budorak wrote a book we just published called Inner Rival, and it's silencing the negativity within. And he uses this analogy that think of your head as a water bucket, and it starts out the day with pure, clean, sparkling water. Beautiful. Okay. Clear mind, clear vision, clear thoughts, and everything from self-doubt to crap on the radio to misinformation on social media to somebody cut you off, just little drops of dirty water coming in there. And so all it takes is one little dirty drop and you've really contaminated the whole thing. And that's why you have to keep flushing out great conversation, great reading, because we have to really work hard, because otherwise if you get trash in, trash out. And even a little bit of pollutant can really start causing you to not see clearly or mission drift.
I think mission drift, is Peter. Why can't I? Peter
Greer.
Greer. Yes. So mission drift there. So I'm curious, as a person who studies leadership so intently, what are your evolving views on leadership? What are something you believe now about leadership that is different from what you used to believe?
I think I always believed in the same core principles, like the value of people, the greatness within. But I think I just didn't let my behaviors, go in that way. I think at this stage of life, I am realizing how highly contextualized it is, how different strokes for different folks. I have learned that it's more important to be relational than right as a leader, maybe not as a manager, but definitely as a leader. And I have really learned that if you are not all about seeing the greatness in the people that work for you, you shouldn't be in leadership. And I know you're like, but Tracy, some of the people, but that's a whole separate issue. You know what I'm saying? Because there are people probably on your team that shouldn't be there. We're constantly in a state of realizing, hey, this isn't exactly, it's good to great. Let's get you on the right bus. But I would say it's me growing up as a leader and realizing, lastly, the only person I can really work on is myself. And the more I work on myself as a leader, the more I am clear on what I stand for. And then followers looking for that will resonate with me and will kind of orbit towards each other versus I'm going to mold you into a mini T, and I'm going to bring you up and help. And no, that doesn't work. People have to have a certain level of self-efficacy. They have to have see value in what you're doing. And number two, they have to have a reasonable expectation of success, which means I know we all have self-doubts, but at this stage of the level of leadership, I have got to have people that at least understand they have to be intrinsically motivated and that they see that their success is really up to them. I'm going to lay out the table for you, but how you show up in the meal that gets served is really contingent on you. So I think I'm much more open to not beating myself up as a leader, but being much more collaborative about the exchange between leaders and followers and how beautiful that is, how important that is.
Again, it kind of goes back to this followership and leadership dynamic, this tango, this dance that we have. And, you can lay it out for them, but they have to be a part of that. And,
yeah, I put my hand out. Come to the dance floor with me on this floor to this music in these shoes. And it's up to them.
So with all of this talk about leadership, I'm sure many people who have never really, come to this party before, but are saying, hey, I'm interested in growing. I'm interested in learning. I'm interested in becoming a better leader. Where do I start? I mean, because, you can go to the bookstore and there's like, there's 1,000 books here. I don't know what to do, where to start. What would you recommend for somebody? Where should they begin their growth journey?
Well, I would come to Tremendous Leadership, Tremendous Leadership.
Absolutely.
And we have a series of, are you ready? 34 of these little gems, little booklets, mini booklets. And here's the one we're going to talk about on our podcast, The Price of Leadership. Here I have one, Bradford, You're Fired. Oh, look at this. As a Man Thinketh. That's one of the classics. Acres
James
of
Allen.
Diamonds, Love of God. Here's Mark Sanborn speaking. Here's one we sell tens of thousands every year, Message of Garcia. So we have a series of 34 of these little booklets, and I'm always introducing new ones. If anybody has a historical figure they want to write on, we'll publish it. And that's what I would get. They come in a little box set. So these little booklets are wonderful to read with teams, either on your own. And I would start with those. And some are based on historical figures. Some are more entrepreneurial in nature. Some are more business oriented. Some are more faith-based, but they're all really great seminal thinkers throughout history. I would start with those.
I was reading your book and you mentioned A Message to Garcia, and I had never heard of it before. And I've been in this world for a while, and I'm like, what is she talking about? And I actually went and read it, and I was like, wow. Now, it was written over 100 years ago, and like 1898. So the language is a little bit different. You talk about that, so you're going to have to work a little bit. So it's not just spoon feeding it, but it's talking about this followership and also what it takes to become a leader, and just go get it done, right? It's Nike 100 years ago, before Nike even existed, right? He was talking about it's nothing new, just do it, right? And so I loved it. It's a short little book. It should take you less than a half an hour to read, if that. But the message is so powerful and impactful. And so when you can start with these little nuggets, these 34 little talked about, I think that gives you that starting point, and you can then go off on a tangent and start to see where do I need to go from here? So that I think that's awesome advice. So as we kind of wrap up here, I've taken enough of your time. I appreciate all of your wisdom and your insights. Where can people learn more about your work and about you?
Sure. Well, tremendousleadership.com is the website. It's got our retail shop and the little classic set. We also have all on audio and PDF. So if you live all over the world, shipping is very expensive, but you can still get these, of course, if you're stateside. And if you call us, I have my contact information on there. We do a Leaders on Leadership podcast. I have my speaking, if anybody is interested in me as a speaker or as an executive coach. Also, they can go to traceyjones.com, Tracy with an E. So all that stuff, if you go to Tremendous Leadership, you will find it. And also, if you're interested in publishing a book on your tremendous life and sharing what you've learned with other tremendous people, we also also have a Publish With Us link on there. So that'll take you to LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, some social media, not as much. We have a presence there, but definitely on LinkedIn and definitely on the website, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, the podcast, and our interviews with authors are all on there as well. And I have a little one on Message Garcia. I'll do little webinars. We have free webinars about the different life-changing classics and how you can use them for a team building exercise.
Again, I really appreciate your time. It's been awesome. I look forward to talking with you again. And from Beyond the Office, thanks for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next time. So if you'd like to learn more about remote staffing, feel free to message us for our free guide, The 7 Deadly Sins of Remote Staffing, and how to make sure that you don't commit them and you're successful in your remote hiring journey.